Okay, I think we've got a decent number of people, so we can go ahead and get rolling on this. So this is the fourth episode. The focus is on data analysis in an HPDE environment. In this case, we've got two advanced drivers. They're driving very similar cars, and they are at Laguna Seca. All right, so let's get into the data. These are both advanced drivers, 6-cylinder mid-engine. Cars have some modifications. They're not crazy mods. They're streetable. Performance tires. So let's take a look at what that looks like. We're going to start off with full lap data. This is typically the display that I start with. I'm looking at a full lap. I'm looking at speed versus distance. And I'm looking at multiple laps from one driver just to get a sense for what's going on with the data overall. And I see some good consistency. The biggest area of inconsistency is here, which is turn 9. I can pull up a track map if that would be helpful. So here I am in turn 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, corkscrew. This stuff here, that's turn 9, 10, and 11. So you go around the racetrack. So I see some inconsistency there in 9. There's some other things that look like perhaps traffic or a different approach to a corner, but overall I see some good consistency. These are just lying right on top of each other. So these kinds of things bode well for working with a driver, because we've got a good consistent baseline, and then we can start making adjustments from that existing baseline. Now, I can go in and spend a fair amount of time analyzing this data and trying to extract where the opportunities are. But I have a cheat method as well. I've been looking at driver 11. I've got driver 12 data. Quick note about driver 12's data. I have wheel speed available, and I took a look right here, that stuff here, and this little bump right there. That's fake news. That it doesn't show up in the wheel speed. Sometimes you get that with GPS data. So you have to be careful. This is probably the same thing. So be careful about paying too much attention to every little wiggle. So here I do my test compare with these two drivers. And with, now I've got too much clutter on the screen. So if I look at my fast lap from driver 11, it's a pretty good representation of a typical lap by driver 11. There's one case here where he had a better run through turn 3. So that may come in to play later. But let me clean up this a little bit and just take a look at, what opportunities do we have? There's a big difference here in turn 2. So we can take a look at that. This looks like an opportunity here in 3. That looks pretty good. I wouldn't worry too much about that. There's something going on here, something here. I don't know if that's the most important thing to worry about, but there's something going on here. This is a big difference in 9. I think we're going to want to get into it. Here's something going on in 10. I see a similar thing happening in multiple corners. I don't know that I need to analyze every single one. That looks pretty good. So where are we going to spend the effort? I'm going to dive into turn 2, turn 3. We'll look at turn 6. That may give us some insights into 5 and 10. And then we're going to look at 9 as well. So that's where we're going with the data. And let's start out with turn 2. So I'm going to zoom in there and look at turn 2. This is driver 12 in the reddish orange color. And you can see he's got higher end speed, which often that's better, right? But coming out of the corner, he's at a disadvantage. And he's at a disadvantage coming into the corner as well. What I've got is driver 12 in yellow is coming in straighter, going in deeper, diamonding the corner, and getting a straighter exit. And if I turn off the per lap color and I look at longitudinal acceleration, right here, this transition to red, that's starting to accelerate. So you see this driver is slowing the car, overslowing perhaps, but overslowing for a reason, to get a lot of turning done right here and open up the wheel early and get to throttle early. And that pays off all the way down to turn 3. Turn 2 is an example of a corner where there are many different ways to get through the corner. And data is a beautiful way to do A/B comparison, try different ways and see what works best. Typically, if you switch a dramatic switch in line like this, you don't do one lap and go, well, it wasn't any faster. You do multiple laps to really get that line going, and then you compare the results for those 2 lines. So we're going to go back to the measures graph, go back to a full lap, and let's take a look at what is going on here in turn 9. So what you can see, let me zoom out one tick. What you can see at one point, the drivers are going the exact same speed. Driver 11 slows down more, but is able to catch up. And they're going the same speed through the corner. Driver 12 keeps his foot down and is accelerating deeper into the corner, and then decelerates to get set up for 9. So if we look at where on a track map this happens, that's where driver 12 is still accelerating to that point. This is where driver 11 stops accelerating. So that is a significant distance there. And you can see driver 12 is going to have to decelerate, right? There's a corner coming up. Well, that deceleration happens to be around the time that driver is going to be feeding in some steering. So that deceleration gets some weight on the nose. And in this case, it's actually braking. You can tell it's too steep for this just to be a lift. It's not the heaviest brake, but there's some braking going on. And that's timed to work with turn in. And driver 12 actually hits higher G and turn in a little earlier and is able to get the car turned. So if we look at this, if you look at this, there are a couple opportunities here. There's this, and then we've got this. And this advantage may come from a little bit crisper turn in. I would break these into separate pieces, right? I would say handle this first, or work on this first, see how that feels, see what you can do, and then we can talk about the other stuff later. So that's turn 9.
Quick question on the turn 9 stuff.
Yeah.
The GPS location data seem to show a significant difference in line. Is that significant, or is that just noise from this being from two different cars, 2 different days, whatever?
So, my recurring theme on the line is that I'm not going to believe absolute position, but I'm going to believe shapes. So if I look at shapes here at the top, this may be a clue as to why driver 12 doesn't need to slow down as much. Doesn't turn as sharp. That you can see the radius is there. I don't know the absolute placement, but I see the radius is different. What I see here is I see this driver getting more turning done here and this driver being a little bit straighter. And so I think there is a difference in line, and we do have video. I did not review the video for this section of track, but that would definitely be worth reviewing to take a look at the video. With Race Studio 3, you're going to be able to look at side-by-side video, assuming both drivers do the same acquisition. I'll give you a sense for what that might look like a little bit later when we look at turn 3. But
Okay.
yeah, that's a really good question to look at that. And I do believe there is a difference. I think driver 12, by getting some weight on the nose, is able to get more turning done here early. You can see, look at the G's rate. I'm looking at longitudinal. You can see that the longitudinal or lateral G's kick in earlier, fairly early. Here we're, 0.8, 0.9, 1 G right there, where this driver is, 0.3. So yeah, there's definitely a difference here, and getting turning done earlier can be beneficial. You do have to be careful with this corner and like slow hands. But I think the driver is probably using a little more width on entry. A lot of people enter the corner from mid-track or even a little left of mid-track. I think you don't want to be far right, hanging on the edge of the track, but sometimes there may be an advantage to getting a little bit farther to open up the radius through the apex and exit. Okay, let's take a look at turn 6. Pretty significant difference here. We've got about 4 miles per hour min speed difference, and there's this payoff all the way up the hill. The cars have roughly similar horsepower. I think driver 12 in yellow may have a little bit of an advantage, but driver 11 already created a big deficit by being 4 miles per hour slower in terms of min speed there. So let's zoom in there and see what's happening. Again, this little bump is not real. It should be more smooth. And I can take a look at all of this in, I have some fancy profiles where I do a lot of, can break down all the signals. Let me show you real quick how fancy this gets. Here's my pseudo braking, my pseudo throttle, my Gsum, all of that. I can take a look at it, all of it here, but I can see it here and just the speed trace. Driver 12 actually gets to the brakes a little later. I do like what driver 11 is doing. Early brake, early throttle is kind of the starting approach that I advise for corners like this. But you can see the other thing going on here. I'm going to call this neutral throttle right there. Driver 12 gets to neutral throttle earlier. Driver 11 doesn't get to neutral throttle till here, and that is approximately 1 basketball court later. It's about 90 feet later, which is significant in this corner. And if you look at the throttle pickup point, I'm going to kind of extrapolate and say I got a throttle pickup point here, throttle pickup point here. I also have a pretty significant difference there as well. And let's take a look at I'm going to call that my neutral throttle point and look at that in GPS data. So that spot is right here. And then, oops, wrong button. That spot's right there. And I go back to my measures graph. And that's my other throttle pickup, or my neutral throttle point. And I go back to the GPS map. That is significantly later. So there, and remember, there's a brow right in here, and you get better stability. The car feels better if you can make sure you get some weight on the back of the car. Even though these are mid-engine cars, it's nice to have that weight back there. So that's a significant difference in what I would call the end of braking. And the interesting thing about end of braking, if you look at the pseudo braking signal, the car reaches this sort of neutral state, not just when you take your foot off the brake, but when you apply enough throttle to get rid of engine braking. And that is significant in these sort of fast corners where it's not where your foot comes off the brake pedal, but where you get to this neutral throttle point. That's going to be a stable car. Driver 12 gets to this point of stability earlier and is going to feel more comfortable going fast. So my approach for driver 11 would be to try to do something like this. Emulate that shape. Don't emulate the speed, emulate the shape. See how that feels, and then you can start to, try to move that up. So, and the last thing is to compress the braking zone. Work on this min speed first. And this is a nice braking point. Nice, good early braking point. But I'd like to worry about that last, because if you compress that, this min speed's likely to get worse. So start with the min speed. And let's take a look at turn 3, the last corner. I'm going to get a little fancy with the analysis. So let's see if we can get through this quickly. I want to show the different ways to look. There's many different ways to look at it and sort out what's going on. So we'll zoom out to a lap and we'll zoom in to turn 2 and take a look at what's going on here. So the interesting thing is on the exit, they're not that far apart. The difference is, the lost time is all in here. So what's going on? What are the drivers doing differently here? Let's take a look at the friction circle. So I've got a profile that allows me to pull up several different signals associated with that. Okay, so here's my PsuedoBrake signal. This is for a driver 12. And this is my Gsum. And what I see, there's a little difference here because you never really get fully straight between turns 2 and 3. So even under braking, there's a tiny little bit of lateral loading. But you see, as I release the brake, the Gsum stays straight all the way across. Let's look at driver 11. And what I'm seeing is a pretty big difference between the two. So that's, again, driver 12 and then driver 11. So driver 11 accelerates and comes or gets into the brake, comes back out. There's this area right in here. That's all lost opportunity. I've got another user profile that I can pull up. Or I kind of zoom in on everything that's going on. So here's driver 12 getting out of the brake, getting out of the throttle, getting into the brake, and then slowly releasing. Let me take a look at that. Releasing over a significant distance. That's almost 200 feet, 200 feet for brake release and throttle pickup. Let's see what we've got going on with driver 11. Gets into the brake earlier, but rolls in very, very slowly and then quickly comes out. So that's my brake point. Switch drivers. You can see he's braking 70 feet earlier, again, a basketball court earlier. But it's a slow transition rather than this quick application of brake and slow release. I've got slow application and slow release, but not a real slow release. And so the lack of a slow release gives me that missing piece there. There are other views of this where I can look at my GPS map and let me map my Gsum signal, G magnitude. Let me scale it here a little bit. Okay, see this red trace coming all the way around like this? That's riding the rim of the friction circle. That's driver 12. As we look at driver 11, we see heavy braking, and then that release out of the brake and lack of overlap. And this driver is getting a lot of turning done fairly late in the corner. So you can see there's more bending going on here to get the car turned around. So there's a little bit of difference in line, but there's a big difference in the use of the brake pedal. I have yet another way to look at this, which is side-by-side video. So the cameras are mounted in different points and the cars are going different speeds, so it's hard to match it up completely. But here we are, we're all done with turn 2. We're headed towards turn 3 under the tire bridge, and you can see cars are doing about the same speed. In the olden days, before data, people would say, well, just check your speedometer when you get to the exit curb, and that tells you how you did in the corner. Well, maybe not. So let's sort of go back earlier. These cars are not in the same spot because I couldn't quite match them up because of the differences in speed. But here we can see they both, hit close to 80 miles per hour. You can see this is a little bit earlier, so it's a little deceptive, but driver 12 is on the left, full throttle. This driver's getting into the brakes. And as we proceed, this is we see about a 15 mile per hour difference in the data. So this is kind of representative of the difference in speed. Here's my friction circle. And in this case, braking is down in this direction. And it's got a little tail on it, so you can see the direction. You can see it's making that sort of hollow, that sort of L shape instead of the plump shape. You can see it's doing that. And with driver 11, driver 12 is keeping it more plump. It's going about half speed. So here they get to the apex, and their speeds start to get much closer as they come through and work their way out. So there's all that time lost. And that was one of my first eye-opening experiences working with data, is how much time I was losing between the start of braking and mid-corner. Even if I had decent mid-corner speed and decent exit speed, there was just tons of time I was leaving on the table. So what's our advice for this driver going to be? So I come up with 4 things. Turn 2, try diamonding the corner. See how that works. Turn 9, carry speed deeper by keeping the throttle down longer, and try to, you're going to need to brake and try to coordinate that with turn in. These are fairly radical changes in strategy for these corners. So I lumped those together, and that's probably enough for one session. And then I broke out the other 2. These are a little more subtle in terms of timing of the use of the pedals and a little bit of finesse. So these kind of go together. Turn 6, I'd like to see an earlier brake release, earlier neutral throttle, earlier acceleration. We're not going to worry about the brake point. Just keep that the same. That's fine. Work on these things, especially that neutral throttle, to get the car nice and stable mid-corner, especially with that brow that you're coming into the dip at the apex. Turn 3, carry speed deeper. Overlap the brake release and steering, and we talked about quicker application of brake and then a much slower release of brake, and overlap those 2. So this would be a good set of things to work on another session. So that's basically 2 sessions worth of data analysis for that driver. Driver 12, I found some stuff, a lot more subtle, a lot harder to find room for improvement. So I focused on driver 11 because it's easier, low-hanging fruit. Driver 11 would be one of the faster drivers in the advanced or the solo group. Driver 12 more so.